Shanti. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And tonight our topic looks at the question of whether spirituality is relevant to, as we say, day-to-day life. And so as usual, we're going to start with a bit of a reflection. And it's very nice to consider thinking of it not as meditation, but as going inside into an inner classroom, a place of study, where I want to understand, experiment or experience, realize and apply. And my experiment at this moment will be to contrast two different awarenesses. So I sit in that inner classroom, that place of observing my inner world, and I consider the thought that there is a tiny point of light in the center of my forehead, which we call the soul. And I just sit for a moment with that feeling that there is a tiny point of light in the center of my forehead. And I contrast it with another experience. I am that tiny point of light, and the body is wrapped around me. I, the soul, a tiny point of light, I am seated behind the forehead. There are the windows of the eyes, and the feeling the body is dangling down below. I experiment, contrast these two states, and explore how they would affect my moving through the day, acting and interacting. Om Shanti. So, welcome to those who joined us on tonight's session. And so the topic for our interview with the Raj Yogi is spirituality always relevant? And we actually welcome those who have joined, if you have the courage to share your experience of those two awarenesses that we've been invited to experiment with. If you have the courage to share, your thoughts are meaningful and also reinforces your discovery when you have a chance to share. But if you don't plan to share, we would welcome you to email the center, or even just perhaps maybe go deeper into what you were experimenting with. And so at least I can actually share on behalf of myself. The first, I was thinking about actually a topic that we're going to have a little bit later on, and this aspect of ownership. Actually, I still identify myself as this ordinariness, this sense of physicality with the first experience. And this point of light is still something separate from me. Um, my problems are still there, my perceptions are still there, my sense of limitedness is still there. All of that was in a second. It wasn't actually just a nice intellectual exercise. It's quite interesting. But it was really reinforced the contrast when I could experience the second one. A sense of being a living being. But I don't know if it's because of having been in this journey for quite a few years to get to that point. Because I could appreciate first coming to the study, there's a lot of interference and maybe a lot of imagination to begin with, and a lot of forcing things too. So I'm not sure what your thoughts were in terms of that experiment. I love doing that experiment again and again as if you've never done it before. Um, because, and just to be open what you experience, because it's very eye opening and leaves a deep impression.
Mm. This idea of always relevant. The word always, or sometimes we say constantly, suggests that it's natural. It's a way of life. And when I say I am this being, I am a soul, it's not that I have a soul, which is really what the first statement suggests. I have this point of light in the center of my forehead. It will come and go according to when I need to think about it. It's not really going to become a way of life. It's a bit like I have a car. It kind of comes and goes into my awareness. But if I am this soul, it will become, if you will, my new identity. It's me. So, when I stabilize in that awareness that I am a soul, it's not that I'm sometimes it and sometimes not, but I start to just live that way, which is our destination. I think it will radically transform how we live. So it's extremely relevant when we're talking about that kind of reframing of our life. So it really asks, how far down the rabbit hole are you planning to go when you look at relevant? And as we, go into it, really exploring what spirituality means as a way of life. And we often use the words spirituality and purity interchangeably in this study. And because the life that we all are seeking is a life of happiness, that's all we want is peace and happiness. Every action we do in the day is inspired or motivated for that kind of attainment. And once we start to understand that purity is the means of getting peace and happiness, so therefore I'll be very interested to know how to achieve that state of purity, which we also call spirituality. So we're just sort of working our way backwards from what we want, which is peace and happiness, to the seed of how you get that. Mm-hmm. And spirituality means I experience myself to be a spirit. So once I can connect that experience, not that I have a spirit, but that I am a spirit, and how that awareness, it takes me into a very pure state of being. And that means I'll be able to achieve that peace and happiness, that quality of life. So I think it's extremely relevant when we start to connect the dots.
Now, we're touching on a subject that we will actually cover a bit more in depth in one of our Raju Essentials of this month, because one of those topics will actually be purity. And purity is a very loaded term for many. It's not a loaded term when we think of little children, though. When we think of little children, purity is just, it rolls off of our tongue so easily. But in terms of, if you don't mind clarifying for those who who are watching, and when you are sharing that spirituality and purity are one and the same,
Mm.
in terms of the context of when you're sharing that I am a spiritual being versus spirituality is just another hobby that you have in life.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You know, this word purity, we can connect it to so many other words that I think are really meaningful to us and maybe take the unloadedness off, but they all are children of purity. And some of those words are real, authentic, beautiful, um, and of course, transparent, inside and outside match. These are all under the umbrella of purity. And so when we talk about purity, the technical term is that there's nothing else mixed in. That it's just, so we're very often saying the real me, the true me, or real love, true love, or real respect, true respect. You know, we love these words, real, true, authentic. These are all basically stand-ins for purity. It means there's nothing else mixed in there. So when we're talking about wanting to get to the real me, we're saying the pure me, where there's nothing else mixed in. And if we're completely honest with ourselves, we know that when I am my real self, I am happy. This is why children are so light and easy, is because of that innocence, that purity. There isn't anything else mixed in there. There's no hidden agendas. There's no manipulation. Just what, pure selves. So to return to that pure state or that true state will require the truth. And there's a basic understanding that what is true is that which is eternal. So as long as I am identifying myself with things that are not eternal, things that are temporary, I am not in the realm of spirituality. I'm in the realm of physicality. As soon as I go into identifying with what is eternal, I'm entering, which also happens to be non-physical, I've entered the realm of spirituality. And because I'm connecting to what is eternal or true, I am moving towards purity.
I was just about to share that, purity is this original me. I was about to say, one needs to wrap their head around that, but it more feels like they need to wrap their heart around that,
Mm,
because of perhaps maybe these ideas we have of our sense of self.
mm,
And it's relevant to this topic, relevant about purity in terms of what I wanted to ask next. It's the whole topic of this session. Why do many have you noticed, or perhaps maybe personal experience or participants you've met in so many retreats or sessions? Why do they feel that spirituality is not relevant?
I think sometimes it's just a deep habit of using other approaches to life. Because spirituality seems, for lack of a better word, flimsy.
Mm.
Flimsy in this very concrete, big problem world. It seems like a really flimsy way to go about addressing things. Um, and yet, if we looked honestly, we'd see that's what's actually running the world are these very subtle energies, these very subtle things such as intentions, attitudes, perspective, awareness, memories. This is all what's actually running things. The fact that you're even sitting here, if you are listening to this, is because you had a thought. That's what really made it all happen, was that thought that I will listen. So it's really these subtle energies that are running the show. So I'd have to enter the realm of the invisible or these subtle energies to really get into the foundation of life. But what we hear often in retreat or group settings is they will go through the course or retreat, enjoy, have nice experiences that they are creating for themselves with what they're studying, and then at the end, they kind of have that feeling, okay, I have to return to real life. And they start to get very nervous, as if they don't see the application of what they've just done with real life. Like it's just too flimsy to really be useful or something. So we'll get questions like, it's usually the same. It's usually interactions. I've got this coworker or this relationship and it's challenging. And what does Raj Yoga say about that? And it's always the same answer. Be spiritual. Consider yourself to be a soul. It's like, well, how's that going to help me? Like I need to
How's it
know.
going to
I
pay
need
for my
something.
bills?
Yeah, I need to know something more concrete. In other words, we're used to old worldly ways, even if they're not working. We're used to worldly ways of addressing what we feel are very big issues. And what spirituality is doing is giving me a different operating system. But I'm so used to the old operating system, which is quite clunky, actually, and actually not relevant because the problems are at a spiritual level. And so if I'm using physical means to address a spiritual problem, I would say that's not relevant. I would want, we're not peaceful, we're not happy, we're not content, these are all spiritual states. So why would I use a physical means? It's a bit like when people are unhappy, they eat. I'm trying to use something physical, we call it a comfort food, to address what we know is a spiritual problem. So if I want to do something relevant, I should be very interested to go into spirituality to address a spiritual problem. But we have the old operating system is really deeply, we're very attached to it. And so we find we keep reverting back to it. It's extremely powerful. If you take the course, the essence is consider yourself to be a soul and remember the Supreme Soul. And as you take the course, you begin to experience how considering myself to be a soul feels and how connecting to the Supreme Soul feels. And in those moments when you feel it, not think about it or intellectualize it, but feel it, it's very clear how relevant it is once you feel it.
Can you clarify, perhaps maybe even kinesthetically, personal
Mm-hmm.
experience, the difference? Because I know that these are meant to be practical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, kind of like when you were talking about fitness, being
Mm-hmm.
able to talk someone through and to be able to know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So intellectual or thinking about it versus practically.
I had a very interesting experience over the last couple of days. So, of course, many businesses are operating in very unique ways. When people come into the business place, there are, if you're listening to this later, this is during a pandemic, there are so many protocols and restrictions and guidelines. Masks are mandatory, distancing, hand sanitizing, the list goes on and on. And that's multiplied in a fitness setting, actually. And you can see that when people first look at the website and they start to think about it, they haven't come in yet. They're thinking about it. Their own thinking stops them from coming in. They start to imagine all sorts of difficulties. I think that's probably what is creating a lot of nervousness in the students going back to school, and the parents are trying to reassure them. Wait till you get there and experience it, and then you'll know, rather than just trying to extrapolate or think. But you can tell that. So there was an incident where someone called in and they were quite upset. They hadn't come in yet, but they were very upset and not feeling that things were clear on the website. And so I was going to be the instructor that they would see the next day. So the management came and I suppose they thought they were warning me, and they shared, this soul's coming, they're quite upset, good luck. Basically, I remember my first go-to, the first when they came and told me, was to go into that experience of being a soul. And what that does is it taps into a qualitative experience of the self, if you can feel it. And it was the only relevant response to what they shared, because what they were concerned about is that I would have some sort of difficult encounter. And I knew that wouldn't happen if I was stable in a certain experience of myself. I would operate in a different way, and I'd also was sending ahead lots of love and good wishes to that soul. I really understood. It completely changes how you feel. And so I knew that if that soul could come in and experience it rather than just sitting there from a distance thinking about it, it would be very different. And especially if they came in and experienced it in a welcoming way. And so they did come. And I remember I knew so many things weren't going to be the way they wanted. No water fountain, no locker room. They're high end corporate, so they always change it. No locker room, no washroom. This could be a complete disaster. Not only were they upset by what they saw on the website with all these restrictions, but they were going to come into a situation they didn't know. They didn't know they wouldn't be able to change. They came with their work clothes. So this was going to be a disaster. Or
Mm.
was it not? So I remember they came in and, they even started to walk. And I said, no, you have to wait for the instructor. You can't just walk. Everything was not the way they wanted. And yet somehow they're being there, experiencing it, and having a very different, a very welcoming. We get into a lot of trouble when we try to intellectualize, try and figure out without experiencing it. But when we just stop, just surrender and just experience, not think about what the experience would be, but actually experience it. Intellectual is I try to be clever and try to come to some sort of conclusion without experiencing it. But what if we get ourselves into a lot of trouble that way. But what if I just experienced it and see what happened? It was really interesting what happened. There was not 0% difficulty, absolutely no difficulty whatsoever. So often, yeah, there's that difference between I could talk about an exercise and we could imagine what it would feel like to do the exercise. But it simply is not the same, if we're honest, as actually doing the exercise. And that's pretty obvious to us. It's the same in spirituality. I could talk about being a soul, sometimes even think about it, but it's the same internally. I'm just talking about it. And not even realize I'm not actually experiencing it. I'm not going there. So this is the idea of, okay, there's a point of light in the center of my forehead. If I was really experiencing it, I wouldn't even think that way.
Like something separate from
Yeah,
you.
I wouldn't even think that way. If I really want to experience it, I would never have this. I would say I am a point of light. And it's not just semantics. It means I am not just thinking about it or intellectually, I am experiencing it. So to be very clear with the self, what I'm doing, if I want to access that other operating system, I can't imagine my way there or intellectualize my way there. I have to experience my way there.
So this becomes quite relevant in Raja Yoga Essentials because aside from taking the foundations course, there's a second course that's offered, which is Raja Yoga and You, which is really this is something that's really pulling one to go deeper. And how do I go deeper? So when you were sharing about the example of that individual coming in, there seems to be a lot of letting go that needs to happen. And that seems to be the case as well with experiencing myself to be a soul without even realizing that there's a lot of letting go. So someone can ask, how on earth am I supposed to let go? And I don't even know what I'm letting go of.
Yeah, this soul, I must say, it must be 6 or 7 months they haven't come in. There is a very high percentage of souls, and I know it's fear. And I know that it's according to their own time. I'm also aware that as more souls do come into the facility, they're actually creating an energy that's making it easier for others to come. So this is sometimes a service we can do, but quite frankly, you cannot force a soul to let go. It has to happen at their own time. There is the benefit, and I know souls won't think of it that way, the benefit of external circumstances can nudge me towards letting go. When our back is up against a wall, we kind of do the thing we're afraid to do. So we can see that scenes in the drama are helping souls to let go. Things are being pulled from them, if you will. But and you mentioned the word heart earlier. I think that's the number one thing that really is motivating us, helping us to overcome fear. When it becomes untenable for my heart to be that inauthentic, that disconnected from core values or true self, when that just becomes too uncomfortable, then I will be very propelled to do something.
Mm-hmm. This very much is related to perhaps it'd be a topic we will cover
So
in
many
future
topics.
sections. Yeah, well, because
It's
I was
good.
determining the schedule for September. So the one of the topics was actually, well, first of all, the introductory of powers of the
Mm.
soul without it becoming just segmented. Right?
Mm-hmm.
At least personally, my experience when it came into the study, it was very disconnected for myself with my own ideas, so to speak. But letting go is a power,
Mm-hmm.
and that seems like a chicken and egg kind of thing. I
Mm.
don't have the power to let go, and
Mm.
yet there needs to be timing to let go.
Mm.
And what? That's all I can say.
Yeah. The heart or love or longing is a power of its own.
Mm,
Um, think of the mother lifting the burning car on top of baby. So when something goes off inside at the time that it goes off, where I start to, we say, develop disinterest in one thing and a profound interest in the other thing, I think that is the first step that starts this journey, is that idea of disinterest. And, that's definitely related to the topic of relevant. When we look at the example of Brahma Baba, we know that was the energy
mm,
that was inspiring him at the very beginning, was disinterest. Even though he had a very beautiful life, he felt disconnected from something very important. He wasn't sure what, but he felt very disconnected from something very important, and that was quite grow increasingly relevant, not just to the quality of his own life, but in terms of the welfare of all of humanity, extremely relevant. And so he started to have this disinterest that he just couldn't continue to go along ignoring this feeling that something very important was missing. And so he's very interested in figuring out what that was, and disinterested in continuing and pretending that that wasn't happening. And I think that's where it actually starts.
mhm,
Is that, and that's a power to get the thing. It's kind of, well, how do I get power when I have no power? So we're kind of creating power out of nothing. This disinterest is perhaps the first power that sets this thing in motion. It's like you have an inert object and suddenly it's supposed to start moving,
mhm,
without any force. For those who do physics, they probably will know about this, but that disinterest is quite a power. Yeah.
Now, this is probably a big question, but you touched upon it when you were talking about the participants in retreats where they feel like, okay, now I have to go back to reality.
Mm.
Um, with some, how does one bridge that gap if they're tired, they probably disinterested, and they want to feel that spirituality is relevant to their day-to-day life. Um, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's quite beautiful. It's very funny what happens in that last session. Um, it's an interesting thing to note that sometimes we ask questions, and the answers we get, we don't feel it's relevant to the
Mm,
question that we asked, but it actually is. And Daddy Genki was great at this. It's a bit like a tree, and we tend to kind of be hanging out in the branches and leaves and being able to see right to the seed. Extremely relevant because it will fix the whole tree. So souls are looking a little bit crazy at the end of the retreat. Oh my goodness, it's going to end. I have to go back. And so there's two real things they receive. One is an overarching kind of suggestion to really, really go deeply into soul consciousness. so you can start to experience, feel it, and you'll see its relevance. But the other thing, which is a bit more concrete to make this, to support it in your life, is to start to have we call it spiritualize your life. Start to introduce disciplines, very practical disciplines in your life, that so there's a certain spiritual rhythm to your day that really helps to see the connection. I'm still living my life, but we call it spiritualizing, and they actually do a lot of the problem solving themselves. They really get into it. Something as simple as, yeah, I've got my device all the time. How can spiritual, my mom, I have to, says, okay, really simple. I'm going to put an app on my device, a traffic control app, we call it. I have just spiritualized my device. And now there's now a discipline of spirituality connected so that I can able to see what we call the integration of spirituality. So we have these disciplines that are super helpful. We still are living our day, we work, we interact, but I'm starting to spiritualize my day through these disciplines. We call them disciplines of purity, but through these disciplines. So what is my activity first thing in the morning? How can I spiritualize the beginning of my day through the day? I have to eat. How can I spiritualize that? I have to interact. How can I There's so many. So these disciplines are really, really helpful in seeing how spirituality can look in one's life, providing that structure to experience it. So I'm a big fan of starting to introduce those disciplines in even little ways into your day.
And we'll cover those on the Raj Yoga Essential
Mm.
sections, with those sessions. Um, but do you think that in general, let's say just put the word spirituality aside in terms of just that word, not even more than a word, but let's say use the word identity, self
Mm.
identity,
Mm.
or the experience or lack of experience or lack of
Mm.
awareness or
Mm-hmm.
awareness of self identity. Do you feel that individuals are very much aware of how much that is relevant in their life?
You know, indirectly or at some subconscious level, perhaps, but not really. We're the the nature of the identity that we've become attached to distracts us from looking at identity. I know that sounds odd, but we've developed a sense of self that's very physical and external, and by its very nature, it pulls us away from looking at the issue of it. It really disguises itself or hides itself from being recognized. So we tend to identify, we say an image, but with everything temporary, everything out there, starting with the body. And we become very engrossed in it, but we never really stop to think, is this a healthy way to identify myself given where I want to go? Is this relevant to where I want to go? To keep identifying myself in a physical way, is that going to lead me to the quality of life that I want? And what it does lead me to is a lot of begging and racing and taking and manipulating to try and distort and mold everything out there into the way I want. Um, so we actually are losing the very foundation of quality life, which is self-respect. So really to kind of stop and look at the identity that I am moving around in, is it really connected to what I want to experience, that peace and happiness? And they will say, yeah, sure. Yeah, it is. If I get this thing, then I feel happy. Of course it's. And then you always have to ask the obvious question, what if you didn't get that thing? What if you didn't have that job, or that person no longer liked you, or you lost this? I mean, is that the way you want to lead your life? And so it's a bit of a scary question to look at the very foundation of your life and say, I don't think it's really healthy. then I have to do something about it. So I can see wanting to avoid it completely. But awareness is king.
So there's a deep connection between self identity and the kind of value that's really going to be satisfying me.
Mm-hmm.
That's another big topic.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps one more question since we
Mm-hmm.
started a little late. What is the relationship between peace and spirituality? Because honestly, everyone's looking for peace. Maybe we have different ways of achieving it. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's not really a healthy way of trying to achieve it. I mean, it may look so upside down for some, but honestly, they're
Mm-hmm.
really looking for something to help them forget or feel
Mm-hmm.
lighter about things. What is that relationship between spirituality and peace?
We tend to have two, because we're so caught up in the physical world, we tend to have two approaches to experiencing peace. One, we say it's going to war. It may not look like out in a war, but just trying to manipulate or control or force a situation to go the way I want. So we go to war for peace, or we escape for peace, which includes distraction. And this idea, what spirituality says, is that I am peace. So I don't need to do anything to anything out there to experience peace. I am peace as a soul, and I don't need to run away because peace is here wherever I am. So by experiencing myself to be a soul, and the experience of peace, I like the term that's used, mukti, or liberation for peace. Peace happens whenever I'm able to let go. Um, it's the attaching and grasping and clinging that's causing stress and tension and peacelessness in the soul. To think about, for example, you have a situation where you're very attached to a particular outcome, and you are convinced that that outcome is good and right and beneficial. And it may very well be. That's not the problem. It's your attachment to it. And you'll notice that you keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. It's kind of driving you mad, right? There's no peace. It could be very good, you know. Um, this idea of, and then that experience, to me, it's like the mind is like this. It's holding so tight. And if you do that, try doing that right now, holding your hand in a really tight fist. It is painful, painful, right? Even if I'm holding on to something good, it's painful. And I'm probably killing the good thing. Now, how does it feel? It feels wonderful to let go. We call this purity. And to let go, because the true nature of the soul, when nothing's mixed in, we're not attaching beings when we are our true self. The true nature of the soul is to flow, to ease, to let go. And I know some say, well, how's anything going to happen? Well, what we don't get to ever experience, because we're so busy trying to make things happen this way, is we don't realize that through this letting go, this power of purity makes things happen. Good things happen. Long-term things happen, but we'll never get to know that because we never use it. But lucky is the one who, from this, gets to experiment. You know what? I'm going to try a different approach. I'm going to try letting go. And it's like magic. If they're patient enough, it's like magic. Things happen that you could never have made happen if you just tried to force them. And it's not, and you don't even care because you've got the thing that you wanted all along, which was peace. You don't even care what happens. It's all good because you have that peace. Peace makes wonderful things happen, but we have all we want because we are peace when we experience ourselves to be souls. So spirituality, going into the experience of being a spirit, connects me to my true nature, which is very light. Letting go, we use the term detached, but free. This kind of nature, I start to feel it. That's called peace. And when you move through the world that way, it's as if the world bows down to such a soul. Everything everybody loves peace. They cooperate with peace. And of course, the elements love peace. Nature loves peace. So there's this cooperation from everything if I can be peaceful, not forceful.
When you share, it makes me think of, when you hear of, I was thinking about this morning during one of the meditations of how a tree or a plant bends and
Mm,
and it's bending and it looks like it's becoming misshapen, but it has a structure in which it can withstand, but it returns back to its original native
mm,
structure. So when you were sharing, it was making me think of, on a spiritual level, the native structure of a soul
mm,
that's orally is that state of peace. And we
mm,
maybe have perhaps externalized that. And so
mm,
this is where we really do encourage, and this last thing I'll say before we go on a short little reflection, encourage souls to join for the experience sessions. Those are the actual practical experiences of what Judy is talking about. So, but we'll let Judy share what the timings for those are if you are not aware of them, because we also have a new added session for that as well. So,
mm. So we'll have a little reflection to end. I know it's late or overdue, but maybe one moment. Because it really just takes a second to turn on the switch of experiencing myself to be a soul. My sense of self has been fragmented and spread out in the outer world. Different roles, different responsibilities, different relationships, different attachments, expectations, desires. I have become so fragmented, and this has drained me. And it's made me feel so compromised, almost a lack of integrity. But when I experience myself to be a soul, it's this feeling of all of those fragmented bits releasing from the outer world and coming together into a single point, me, seated inside this body behind the forehead, me, this sense of centering, of becoming united, integrity. And it creates such a feeling of calm, a relief that I don't have to sustain all of those things to feel myself. I actually need to let go and come into this quiet, united, single point of being. Creates a sense of calm, relief, coming home. Om Shanti.
thank you for joining in, and apologies for this is running later than we wanted, but it's a beautiful topic.
Mm.
Thank you, Judy, for lovely, lovely thoughts that you've shared. Perhaps I'll pass it on to Judy now in terms of upcoming sessions and, of course, the experiential aspect of what this is all about, not just talking about it. All right. Thank you.
And thank you to our interviewer, Nora. Very quick, just reviewing. I know we're into September, a new term, if you will. And so our schedule hasn't changed a lot. We will try to post it on our website very soon. But these interview sessions will continue on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7:35 to 8:15. Experience, the drop-in meditations will continue on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6:45 to 7:30, and we're adding another drop-in session experience on Sunday evenings, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. So you're welcome to join. Regarding the Raj Yoga course, there will be one in September that will be up on the website soon. And Inner Fitness will continue as well on the Zoom platform on Saturdays from 2 to 3. I think the topic coming up this Saturday is healing. I could be wrong, but I think it's healing. So you're welcome to join. And I believe that is it. Thank you so much for joining tonight. Again, you're always welcome to type in questions in the chat or thoughts. We welcome them. Until we meet again, wishing you much peace and beautiful experiences of spirituality. Om Shanti.